All right, here we are, everybody. Episode 13. No, I don't know what episode this is. We stopped counting episodes.
Are you talking to me?
Episodes ago.
You talking to me?
Sean, are you here? Sean,
I was like, wait a minute. I was like, oh, okay, so the show did start.
The show is started.
We will get it next week, dude.
This is why we need a clapboard.
Next week,
Sean only understands the language of clapboards.
Right. And then there's two things. When the drummer does like this, those are two things I understand.
1, 2,
it's about
3,
to go
4.
down. Yeah. So anyway.
Then he's got nothing after that.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah, man. So, hey, thanks for the intro, John. I didn't mean to interrupt you, man. No. That was like the third week in a row.
Was it? We interrupted each other.
I don't know when we start though. That's the thing. Like I think we should maybe the clapper would work.
What are you talking about? Les just said 3, 2, 1.
You're right. Never mind. I'm bullshitting. I'm just trying to be funny.
No, that's all right. We'll get a clapboard for you. I know this is all just an attempt to get a clapboard. So
yeah, I do. We do need a little production going on in here, man. What you been up to, bro?
Man, it has been a really slow week. We haven't really done anything, actually.
It feels like we just recorded
It was like a week ago.
Well, I guess it was a week
ago.
Yeah. But I don't feel like we did much in between there.
No, I've just been thinking about in fact, I was just talking to baby Sean about going out on the lake, on the canoe, doing some fishing.
Yeah, I went out there. Man, there's this dude that goes out there every morning, right? Well, I got to tell y'all about the revolutionary that lives across the street from Memorial Park, man. This dude, every day, gets on this I sent you a video of this guy.
I didn't know that.
Gets on a mic, and he's like talking this shit through his speaker out of his garage, and he's like, to be a revolutionary, you got to read books, blind black man. And I'm like, are you talking to me?
Wait, what
you got to read books.
What part of Memorial Park is it?
Right in front of the basketball courts.
Okay.
There's a house right there.
Okay.
Yeah, so I go out there in the mornings waiting on the center to get ready to open. And he's like the last 3 days, man.
That's been we should befriend him.
I know, I wanted to, but he was like in the back of his garage. I didn't want to walk up on him. So I'm just looking like, I hear you. You know what I mean? It was pretty cool.
You got to walk up on him with your new ink and be like, I am a revolutionary. That's what happened. Sean got some new ink.
Yeah, got some new ink. That did happen yesterday. Inky Fast. I'm not done yet. I don't want to show it yet, man.
Oh, sorry. And I got some planned too.
Yeah. You got some. That's gonna be dope, man. Yeah. I like that idea. I think I want to get one of them too, man. So anyway, we got a guest.
We do have a guest. We haven't had a guest in a few.
It's been a minute.
Yeah.
And so she's more than a guest. Like I know Alexis Miller and her husband for almost about 16-ish years, man. A long time. So her husband and I were in the Army together.
Okay.
And then, anyway. So, yeah, we been on each other this whole time. I don't know how much of the story I want to tell. I'm tired of I hate talking about Army shit, man. So it's like, yeah, we was in the Army, we did this stuff. But anyway, we stayed in, I guess we didn't really stay in contact. I think I moved back and I bumped into y'all at the Wyfield game. So I was like, what's happening? And then, it's been on since then on. So I've known them for a long time, man. And Alexis is a native of the city.
Not quite a native.
You're not?
I'm a baby native. I've been here since I was 11.
Oh, okay. Yeah. You from here?
I'm from here though.
Yeah.
It's not native.
Down there in Wyfield. You went to Wyfield High School?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And and then what after that? You went to CC?
Yeah.
CC graduate?
Yeah.
That's bougie as hell right there.
Yeah. That's why she's got the sparkly water.
Yeah. That's where you pick that stuff up. Okay, I see.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So thank you for coming, Alexis. We appreciate it.
CC, I imagine, just has fridges and fridges full of sparkly water, right?
Yeah. I wasn't bougie enough for the CC kids.
No. How was that experience there for you?
It was extra white.
Was it?
It just was what it was.
I never noticed that there.
I didn't know
yeah,
that.
you didn't know that. Extra white and extra rich. I had a baby that when I started school. I had a 3-month-old when I started school, and I went there because they have a really dope grant for single parents, that paid for daycare and paid for about 75% of my schooling. But I remember the part I had to pay for, it was like $1,500, and I was struggling to write them checks.
Yeah.
And I would be in the financial aid office, and parents were writing checks. At that time, it was only $30-something thousand, which was a lot, but they write the check for the whole year, and I'm like,
you're over there all.
What kind of money is that? Like, I'm struggling. I need a payment plan for this $1,500, and you guys are writing $30,000 checks. I can't.
That's crazy, man. That's crazy. Yeah, Heidi Lewis. That's her name, right? Yes, we're friends with Heidi Lewis. You know Heidi too, yeah.
I've heard of Heidi. I think have orbited Heidi.
Okay. Yeah, she did she did 2 people's colleges here. She's a professor at CC and whatnot. Yeah.
We
really
also had a child as undergrads, though, Sam and I.
Did y'all? Oh, that's dope, man.
And it's hard.
Yeah, I bet. So I believe, I don't know which one of y'all are more impressive, but all 3 of you guys, like, I feel like, I don't know how the hell I got lucky enough to, like, be around, because you guys are all teachers, all of you are educators, all of you guys are, like, dope-ass scholars, and I get to hang out with y'all and like, soak it all up for free.
You're your own type of scholar, though, Sean.
Okay, but anyway.
You just need to be in your garage in the morning.
Right.
Being like, in order to be a revolutionary, you
gotta read.
I thought you were going to talk about episode 1, man.
Well, that too. I mean, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
A garage
But anyway,
scholar.
I feel lucky, man. So I appreciate your friendship all these years, and I thank you for being on here, because I've been trying to get you on this show I don't know how long, and just we couldn't jive schedules and you know, whatever. But things are going on in the city, and we've been together through this activism for a while, and my activism, and I tell people, like, she's my sounding board, and like my.
I often hear him being like, "I was talking to Lexi, so."
Yeah. I shoot some over there. She's like, get that shit out of here. No, don't say that. Don't say that.
Please don't say
she's
that.
Like, yeah, go ahead. You good with that? Go ahead. But so yeah. Anyway, you're also administrator for D11.
Yeah, so I'm an educator by trade, like you've said. I've was a classroom teacher for 11 years. 3rd and 4th graders, though, like babies. And then I went out of the classroom for the real shameful reason that I needed to make more money.
That's like the reality,
I'll just
though,
keep it real. I needed
teacher.
to make more money. If I could make more money, I'd still be in the classroom. So I went out and became an instructional coach and a dean, and then assistant principal, all on the southeast side of the city. And before I came into District 11, I've always worked with at-promise kids, or kids that are just highly impacted by poverty, kids of color. That has just been my jam. But then this position opened up that I'm about to explain. I saw a posting for a director of equity and inclusion in our district. I knew we were going to have an equity policy. I wasn't sure I was super qualified, but I was like, I'm going to shoot my shot. That's what I did. And so I am the first director of equity and inclusion in our school district, and the school district that has the first written equity policy in the Pikes Peak region, which is super dope and makes me proud too.
Yeah, it's history. That's like historical. You know, I think folks got a good grasp on this, but what is equity?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question.
It is, because people don't know what it is. In education, the way that I talk about it all of the time is, it is the process of getting the resources to kids, what they need when they need it to be successful. So a lot of times people confuse equality of access with equity, right? Mm-hmm. So Brown v. Board gave us equal access on its face, right? The law says that you guys have all equal access to schools. There were some other laws around, like special education, that gave kids who had IEPs equal access to schools. That's equality, right? You have access to the school system. Equity is much more focused on outcomes. So when we are looking at, the percentage of kids who can't read when they leave our system, compared to different subgroups, so a lot of times white becomes our normalized subgroup, and so we'll say black kids and every other kid compared to white students, what does that look like? And if there's like a gap between that, that's an inequitable outcome. When we look at proportionality and or disproportionality in GT, in my very own district, it's something, and it's nationwide, but it's something we're working on. White students make up 50% of our population, but make up 71% of our GT students who have been identified as gifted and talented in our district. Black students make up about 7.5% and only make up about 1.2% of our kids who are gifted and talented, identified as gifted and talented. So white students are overrepresented, black students are underrepresented. equity would ask us to fix that and figure out ways to get that fixed. Same thing when you look like at discipline, who's being disciplined the most or who's not being disciplined the most. Our district's not even around racial inequity. Our boys, boys and girls are about 50% of our population. Our boys are about 75% of our discipline infractions. That's inequitable. So equity requires that we look at the most vulnerable person in our system. And my consultants say it best, so this is not my words, but they say, like we always say, don't look at the forest, don't miss the forest for the trees. In this case, we do want to look at individual trees, and we want to look at the sickest tree in the forest. And then once we fix the sickest tree, then we can say we have equity.
Yeah, I see. So yeah, that's a good explanation.
Yeah.
So obviously, the people that watch this and that will tune into this understands why that's important. And John, just whenever you want to jump in, man. But as she talks, I'm always like, we could do this forever. So when equity and why it's important to our city specifically. And so I know, and then you said that D11 has the only written equity policy, but I know other districts have equity people or equivalents.
Right.
So what do they do if they don't have a written policy? Do you know, or is that something do you know about? Or
I don't know why folks don't have a written policy, but I do know that, Dr. King, we love to quote him, but this is the quote I like the most because he talks about how we can't legislate the heart of man, right? We can't legislate folks into acting right. However, legislation can restrain the heartless. So that's why policy is necessary, because it gives us structures. If you're not falling within this policy and you work for this system, then maybe this system isn't a good fit for you.
Right.
So it gives us structures and things to go up against. I think it's really hard to have equity be the core of what you do when you don't have a policy that backs up its implementation. So I think that's the biggest difference between us and other districts. And it's not me like shitting on another district at this point. It's just we do have policy, which means it's going to show up in folks' evaluations at some point, which means it's going to show up when at some point, if you're not following policy, right, you can get written up. So there's like these things that can happen when you have policy. I know that the other districts, based on their makeup, like Harrison 2 and all of that, they have to have equity somewhere at their core if they're going to educate Black and brown children, right? They have to have it somewhere. I think for me, policy is important, and that's an important distinction.
I agree.
Because here's a structure that you're not going to come outside of this box.
Right, it has teeth with it, right?
Yeah.
You heard it here first, though. Lexi's shitting on every other district.
No. I'm not. Because you know what? Healthy schools and equitable schools mean things for all of us, right? It increases our values in our homes. Like if you want to just get down to brass tacks, like I want every district to do well because that means good things for our city. I think also like when they hire for the position, when they hired me, like to put the money behind it, right? To say, okay, we have a policy, but also we're going to have someone own this work and put our money where our mouth is. And I've talked to our board about this. It wasn't enough money, right? Like you can't put a Black woman in charge of this and say you do this work and you own equity, because that is one of the traps and tropes that we fall into all the time, where we want to put a Black woman or a woman of color in front of this work and make them carry this mantle. So I will say, like, my board and my boss, our superintendent, has really, again, put their money where their mouth was and like expanded my department. I got to hire 2 people, 2 equity liaisons, and I'm going to get to hire an admin assistant. It's still not enough, but like I will say that like I'm really lucky to work for a system that that sees that they have a problem, right? We know we have a problem and is trying to fix it. So I will say that. And I know that public schooling hasn't done great by kids who don't meet like dominant norms, and that includes my own system. Like, so I'm not going to sit here. It's not all sunshine and rainbows here, but like it just. I know that I'm lucky for folks to know that this is where the work starts. Like when we start dealing with the work of equity, that what is it? High tide like raises all ships. Like we can get everybody is going to do well.
Go ahead.
So can you break down a little bit of that equity policy? Because I know a lot. equity is sort of a buzzword in a way right now, and everybody like wants to do equity. What is it, the Jedi specialists and stuff? And I feel like a lot of it, honestly, is kind of BS, right?
Yeah,
they just throw it out there, and it's like this looks like good PR policy, or this looks like not good PR policy, I should say, but like good PR. Corporate PR, basically, not actual policy. So, like, what is that policy that you feel like is important for actually fixing some of these equity problems in D11?
I think where it started for me was even before our policy. So our policy just rolled out last year. So it's been a year, May 20-something of 2020, that it got approved. But before that, when Dr. Thomas came into our district, his strategic plan, he adopted a new strategic plan, and the very first line, one of the very first lines, is we believe in the inherent worth of folks, and then in equitable practices to unleash potential. So I knew then, I was like, okay, like that's his heart, like that's the first line. So equitable practices means a lot of stuff, like you said, it's very vague. But then as you continue to read, like it's alluded to in our strategic plan, like over 11 times. So then when this policy came out, it starts talking about what's going to happen. So allocation is one of them. We will allocate our finances and our human capital equitably. So if we have a school that's struggling, right, because of whatever reason, poverty, or you're just highly impacted by a lot of different factors, and also it's an acknowledgement that we created some of those schools that are highly impacted. You probably are going to have more funding sources, right? We just got done with an equity audit, and our schools on the southeast side of town definitely get more money than any other school in our district, and I saw that data and it made me nervous because, people who like to think of schools as like a business model, well, it's not working, so like let's take that back. And the argument is like, we're probably not giving enough, right? It's probably still not enough money to help our schools, but also on the flip side of that is so this is not equitable. Most of our inexperienced teachers work in those schools. Right. So we have teachers I was a train wreck in my first 3 years of teaching. Like I had no business in front of anybody's kids. Like I'm like, think about those kids often. Like, I hope y'all are all right.
Sorry, y'all.
I hope you guys are okay. I don't think you learned to read or do nothing.
But thanks for training me.
Right, absolutely. Which speaks to our teacher education programs. Like anyway.
Yeah.
So equitable allocation, which we're doing a really good job of. When I looked at our equity audit, I was like, okay, we're not like holding on to money. Our resources go where they need to go. There's extra pots of money. We need to deal with the teacher situation, and if our students are getting access to highly effective teachers. So human capital we could work on. The next thing was around like culturally responsive teaching and cultural competency, and being held accountable to being culturally competent. So that's specifically laid out in our equity policy. So there will be PD around cultural competence and how to have culturally relevant like lessons in front of students.
Professional development.
And we're going to hold you accountable to being culturally competent when you have a cultural mismatch in your school. Like, you need to understand the people that you're in front of. It even went into like our contracts. Like, we are going to be looking at how we make sure that minority-owned businesses get contracts. Like, it was very, very, very specific around how we were going to move hiring a diverse population. So it talked about allocation, hiring, how we train our teachers. It talked about how we, on the operations side of the house, are going to make sure we are even spending our money. So it didn't feel like you said like that kind of like, oh, look at what we're doing. It was like, I was like, how did this get passed? That's really what that was my first question.
My question is like, so all of this stuff, I'm sure is just supported immensely, right?
Yeah. Listen.
You see the look on her face? She's like, hold on.
Our board is actually pretty dope. Like, they're pretty progressive as far as boards go, and the fact that that got passed, I think, a day before or a day after George Floyd. But not because of George Floyd. Like, that policy had been drafted and written and all of that. So they were doing the work before it was sexy. So I can say that. Like, so I will say that. Like, I'm very proud of our board. Again, I still was like, I don't know how that got passed, because sometimes you're like, oh, do you know what this like really says?
What it means.
And I think they're trying to learn though, right? So maybe they didn't understand like what the work actually meant, but they knew something was tugging at them that was like, this is the right work.
Yeah. Go ahead, man.
I mean, I think there are a lot of people who do just, you know, I give people a hard time for being like, no, we need to work on this. There are a lot of people whose hearts are in the right places, but they really haven't thought through
what does this mean?
like how expansive, like you said, this really would be to have an actual equitable outcome, to have equitable outcomes in education. We were just talking about this beforehand, and I'm also reminded too, you know, like I don't remember the exact numbers, but a very small percentage of black men are teachers in K through 12.
Less than 2%.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Somewhere around 1. Yeah. So it's like you don't even have like people going into education like to have that cultural competency, right? That can be like, hey, I understand where you're coming from, right? You might have like some well-off white people coming in like no, I really care about this, but they haven't been trained, like you said. They haven't had the PD. They're just their heart is in the right place, but they really don't know what to do with it. So I mean, it is good that there is that policy, but there are so many inputs into education, I feel like, that you have to deal with, right?
And I struggle, like I struggled after I accepted the position, because I accepted this position 2 days after George Floyd was killed and was murdered, right? And I said, what did I just accept, right? Like, things were pretty easy in my school. I know how to move folks instructionally. Like, I know how to have equitable outcomes. Like, I know how to do this, right? And I also know where I live.
Right.
Like, I also know the community I live in. I love it here, which is why I'm still raising families, but I also know this is El Paso County. And some disgusting people are going to come out the woodworks once we start kind of shifting what this power dynamic looks like. And I'm scared. Like, I'm scared not for myself, but I'm scared for like our district, or how far this work is going to be allowed to move. Because I think hearts are in the right place. I don't know. Sometimes if our community in its entirety is ready to do this work, you know, when our consultants sent out a survey and they were asking really benign questions, right? They weren't like, what do you want out of this equity audit? Like, questions like that. How do you think you can support us in this audit? We got stuff like Black lives don't matter, white lives matter. We got stuff like, and this is from folks in our community, so it always breaks my heart. We got things like, there are no equitable outcomes in nature, so like the racist scientists. So like, so what are y'all trying to do? Like, you know, it's survival of the fittest. It was so ignorant and like heartbreaking.
I hope they didn't go to District 11, those folks.
Yeah, man. So, you know, so this kind of lends itself to where I was kind of thinking, like, you know, the work is like this, you know, it's like a chime phrase or whatnot. But, you know, it has to be braided. There has to be a braided attempts to fight all of this shit, right? Yeah, totally. So if it's happening inside the school, and even to say this school district was the perfect school district and did everything exactly right, and all of the kids were geniuses, right? But they all lived in the ghetto, or whatever happened, you know, or they all live in some sort of poverty, or they all have some sort of abuse at home, or they all have some sort of whatever going on, or like their parents is paying $2,500 for a 2-bedroom, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
So like they don't even really eat unless they go to school or something like that. So all of this stuff is happening outside of the work that you do. Is that a hindrance? Like, does that stop your work, like, effectively? Like,
how do you
not even just the barricade, but like, does it stop it or no?
No, it doesn't. But like, that's the other part of our equity policy that I didn't talk about. It talks about creating ecosystems of equity. So like, one of the things that I'm tasked with is I work with folks in the city in development and trying to figure out, like, what does affordable housing look like? We're a part of this group called the Bridges Collaborative through the Century Foundation, which seeks to integrate schools, because after Brown v. Board, like, we are segregated as heck, right? We're not integrated. And they know that housing is the way that you integrate schools, right? Like, how do we integrate schools through housing? How do we integrate? And the only way to truly integrate schools and be successful is racially and through socioeconomics, right? So you have to have some poor kids and some rich kids and some middle of the road kids all in the same space.
Yeah.
And so we're working with them, and like I'm working with the city folks here. So my job is to create, webs, because you're right, some of that can get messed up, but also the other side of that is like you're talking about like the negative impacts of community, and you're blaming the systems, as you should.
Yeah.
But there are also people who will come in and blame the communities that our kids come from, right? So they'll say things like, their parents just don't whatever,
right.
Or they live in that hood and they just don't whatever. So that's the flip side of like your question too. Like, yeah, the community's gonna be there, right? And I also don't believe in like deficits from communities. We can't simultaneously be like, oh, like when these kids do great on a test, this is all us. We did this, not the community. But when they're doing bad, we blame the community. How does that work? And so I tell the teachers and the people in our district, like, we focus on what we can control, and what's inside our locus of control. And what's inside our locus of control every day is what you do in that classroom. From the time that student walks into your class to the time that they leave it, and like what kind of expectations you have of those students, because I believe that's the biggest problem we have with inequity in our system is there's a belief gap, there's an expectations gap, and we don't believe certain kids can do certain things. If people are honest with themselves, no one wants to have that honest conversation. Yeah. But I had a teacher, this is before I had any kind of power in the district. I was an instructional coach, which is just a fancy like teacher who's out of the classroom. But we had a little Latinx boy, English language learner, didn't read very well, but he took the COGAT, which is how we get kids into GT. Gifted and talented. I need to stop using
No.
So this is how we get them into gifted and talented. And this little boy scored in the 98th percentile on the quantitative piece of the test. And that is hard. That is not easy. So that's a gifted little boy, gifted, right? Yeah. Let's just say that. I go to we have these gatekeepers and these expectations. Sometimes it's all together. Go to talk to his teacher. You need to build this ALP, which is an advanced learning plan for this young man because he's clearly gifted. I'm not doing that. Wait, why? He can't read English. He can barely speak English. Are you serious though? Like, he couldn't do any of that stuff and still in the 98th percentile on this test. Are you for real? Right? And so there's this thing like he can't be gifted because he doesn't follow the dominant norm, right? That's the problem. It's not.
That just pissed me off.
So this raises, I hated school growing up. Like, I did not do well in school growing up. I didn't even graduate.
I was like an A student.
Were you really?
A plus. No.
He was sharp.
Like, I didn't do well, and I guess the gifted and talented stuff you hear about, like tracking of students, right? Like, is this even appropriate in schools? Should we be deciding like who's extra smart and gifted and talented? Like, should we even have these tracking programs at all?
I struggle with it, right? Because, like, I hear what you're saying because what they do with gifted kids, they should be doing with all kids.
Yeah,
like some of the stuff
like
they pull out with kids, like it's the same way I feel about like honors classes in junior highs, or like why shouldn't those kids be doing those cool projects? Because the way that we're teaching those kids to think, every kid needs to learn to think like that. So I hear you. And then I also had a gifted child. And I also was a gifted child, and there were times that I just needed to be out of my class. I don't know, but I struggle. But also, I know that those tests, the gatekeepers, the COGAT, all of that, like if you've ever had, you guys haven't, but if you've ever had the chance to look at it, like it's a vocabulary test, right?
Exactly,
you're like, which is why the quantitative one, like, I'm like, oh yeah, that's gifted. Like, I'm not really sure when these kids like pop as verbally gifted. I'm like, if your parents talk to you enough, like, you're gifted.
Exactly.
You can figure this out, right? Those quantitative kids, I'm like, I don't know, you couldn't have figured that out just by being talked to, but I don't know.
Yeah, my son's always done well in schools and honors and AP and all that stuff, you know, and I'm proud of him, obviously.
Right,
he's doing a great job. But it also seems, and he did that IB experiment, you know, like the middle years IB program at Palmer, and he didn't really like it. And I know some of my friends did IB, and some people are like, oh, IB is great, you know, and it's these different tracks, right? And so I guess part of me is like, gifted and talented seems like it's value laden. Right. Whereas, you know, some people might just be into different things. Like some people are more, you know, like you said, quantitative type thinkers, and some people are more linguistic thinkers. Some people are more hands-on types people. And it seems like gifted and talented is just like, it's saying like, you're an extra special good person. And all these other people are just like, you just got to figure out how to work within the education system.
Get back in the pipeline.
Yeah, exactly. Instead of having just, you know, different types of programs that
personalized learning for all of our students.
Yeah, exactly. I guess that's what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, I hear you. And we're still doing industrial revolution education.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
It's still very factory-like.
Man, we're kind of like segue right in there. So I swear to God, the next thing I was thinking about was community education, right? So like at the Chinook Center, we got the People's College, and there's talks of freedom schools around the city right now. And these things. For the kids that aren't getting this gifted stuff, you know what I'm saying? Like, do you think there's value in the community building these outlets?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's when we look at like the folks who made up the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. They all came out of this particular woman, and I can't think of her name, but this particular woman's Freedom School. When you look at revolutionaries, like they came out of freedom schools. When you look at the Black Panthers and the model they set up in educating kids, right? Absolutely, like there's value there. And they were still going to public school because, to be honest, and this is not me like dogging public schools, when I was a teacher, like especially when I came back into the public school system, because I worked at a small charter that gave me a lot of autonomy to do what I wanted, right? Like if I wanted to pick the kids up and go to a Mache internment camp, you know, down in the southeast corner of the state, I could do that, right? We could talk with my fourth graders. I could talk about Manifest Destiny and like why that was so effed up, like why this was wrong. And you know, we talked about Native American boarding schools, but that was a completely different system, right? Like, it was a small charter. It was actually a really good charter, because I have very mixed feelings about charters, right?
I remember you telling me about this place.
When it was dope. And when you get a public, and they were the first school that taught me about equity. But when you get to a public school system that is guided by policies, right, and some different bureaucracy, I can't get in there. I was writing my own curriculum and be like, well, I'm going to teach you all how to read by teaching you about all the young activists from the civil rights movement, because that's what I did with my third graders. Or I'm going to teach you about this political, like, kind of process, you know, right as we're learning about voting, by taking y'all down to see Michelle Obama speak. I can't do that at a public school, right? Can't do it because I'm restrained by some different things, right? Which is fine, right? Like, but that's why, like, having those community organizations that come in and are able to buffer what your kids are learning. And also with testing and the advent of testing since we were graduating, that's when it really took off. I can't say that a lot of young kids are learning social studies. They're not. It's not on the test. They're not learning social studies. I can't say it, and I'm speaking only for me. I'm not talking about the thousands, millions of teachers out there. There are times I didn't teach social studies. I had to teach them kids how to read and write, and do math really, really, really well. You know, so I'll just keep it real. Indeed. So that's why those freedom schools are important.
It needs to happen.
So do you see that as part of equity, though, as changing the broader way that
like the way system of thinking that the system
operates?
About
exactly.
It's all back to that interconnected question, right? I do. Like, I think about our testing, and again, this is just Alexis. This is not Alexis for D11. Like, I think about our testing, y'all, and the one thing that really makes me nuts is when you think about how much money testing services make, or you think about how much money people who are invested in sorting kids make. It's really disgusting. So like, I think I told you this before. So in Houston, in Texas, they have the STAR test, which is like our CMAS test.
Yeah.
And so the first year they rolled out their STAR, they allowed teachers to get very specific feedback. So they were like, your kids can't write introduction sentences. Your kids have a hard time with this comprehension skill, right? Very specific, which is what you need, right, as a teacher. And so, you know, obviously the kids in the inner city ring of Houston didn't do well, the hood. They didn't do well the first time, but once their teachers got that specific feedback that next year, they outperformed all the kids in the suburbs. Okay?
I'm sure somebody looked into that afterwards,
Let me tell you what happened. The lobbyist for the real estate agents was like, we can't sell our fancy houses if our schools aren't that much better than the inner city of Houston. Do not give feedback anymore. Guess what the hell they don't do anymore? Is give feedback. So yeah, the whole system is effed up, right? Like,
man, I'll set fire to, like, y'all don't understand. I go to prison. Like, that shit made me go to jail, man.
Well, this is, I mean, honestly, my mom talks about
Jesus
this too.
Christ. I guess so, man.
District 20, everybody who moves to Colorado Springs, everybody says, well, you want to move to District 20.
Yeah.
Because they have better schools. And it's like, that's like the white suburban part
it's
of the city.
It's not hard. You got some in-spite of kids. But even with better schools, 60% passing. Your ELA and math, that's all your kids. Like, I don't know. And that's what equity requires. Like, and this is where I get really passionate and emotional. I don't know where 60% of your kids being able to read and write is okay.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm not even talking about like my own district, and I've had, it's shameful. All means all.
Right.
Every single day, even when it's hard. That is my motto. Like, all of my kids better leave my classroom knowing how to read and how to write and how to do math. And they did, because that's what I meant when I was in the classroom and when I supervise teachers. It means every day. I don't care what this kid is coming with. So 60%, what about those other 40%? At what number is it okay to say we just let those kids go?
Slide through there,
you know, and that's all their babies. I mean, and when you start disaggregating it more, we good with a third of black kids knowing how to read?
Right.
Not
even in the best performing district
in
the whole city.
So like, you know, I you know, there's so there's discussion around this stuff, right? And you know, I feel like it's like you said, we focus on D11 or D whatever it is, or whatever we like. You know, for us on the South Side, we look at D2 and D11 instantly.
Those are your schools.
Like, in my head, I don't even really care what D20 is doing, because there's nothing to be done about it. It's to a certain extent, you know. But when you look at all of them all together, black kids around the whole state, around the whole city, or I guess the state, yes, because it's Denver too. We're fucked up. They're killing us, man. And so to say, this district needs to do this, and this district shouldn't get this, or they're not doing the right things with this, funding or whatever it is bullshit. Like, it's the whole state, bro.
Yeah,
it's the whole state. So, and then we talked about like districts. The ones, Denver Public Schools and D11 being kind of say the numbers are kind of similar. And black kids are getting fucked up there too, all the way up the freeway up there. You know what I'm saying? And the same thing is happening all the way down here. So that's the real problem. And for me, I'm looking at these rent prices and these house prices. Parents don't got time to worry about what their kids is doing. They're trying to feed them. Yeah.
But also, that's not their. I hate to say this, but also that's not their job, right?
I see
it as my job, but I see it's like the schools are the education.
You read to your kid every night. You do the stuff as a parent that you should do. But I'm gonna just keep it real. I am a primary teacher. My son, I can't teach him to read, and it's not because I don't have the skills. He doesn't want to hear it, right?
Listen to you,
he really doesn't. And also I want to just be his mama, right? I just want to be able to read with him and show him things just for the joy of learning, not because I need you to you know what I'm saying?
This correctly.
Because I could sit down with him and be on his head every day, but also I don't want to do that.
Right.
And I know education's important, right? Like I know that, but like also I want to be his mom.
Yeah.
Also, I've taught third graders all day, like, and I don't want to come home and teach you.
So you're saying like, that's what these systems are here for. So
and we need to hold them accountable to what they're here for.
Yeah. So if you could wrap up, like like from your perspective, and just for the community, like what is it? What if you could say like. Obviously, we don't know what the magic is, or else we do it, right? But
can you just solve all of this for us real quick in the next 2 minutes?
Look into the camera and solve it, and then we'll wrap it up, okay?
Okay. Schools are a microcosm of the city, of the community in which they live, right? Yeah. So our community is sick and broken and inequitable in every system, medical, policing, our injustice system, right? Like we are inequitable in every system in this country, primarily because we are built on bullshit, right? Like True. we got to keep it real. Like we have to start having these like tours of truth. I think that's where it starts for me. We can't talk about the Mitchell high schools, right? We all know what went down at Mitchell, and this is not a popular opinion. I do think what happened had to happen because we had kids who were not graduating. But also, the tour of truth requires that we own our part as a district and what we did to create the Mitchell. Then also the city owns its part as a city and what they did to create a school like Mitchell. Right? So we have to go on these truth tours, the redlining that occurred in the city, that concentrated poverty and people of color in certain parts of the city. The way that we drew our boundary lines, even within my district, that left schools very highly impacted by poverty that didn't have to be. Like if you just moved the boundary lines like up 4 or 5 miles north, it wouldn't be, it'd be something totally different, right? The way that school choice has unrolled in this state and what it has done to school districts like my district, because everybody is running to District 20, right? We have to be honest about the things that we've created that create some of these numbers.
Yeah.
But then also, going all the way back to Brown v. Board, our kids were doing okay. They were doing okay because there wasn't a cultural mismatch, right? And that's not to say that white teachers can't teach black and brown children. They absolutely can. They have to have the right heart posture, right? But all those teachers were run out of the field.
Yeah.
And you want them to come back to what? Low pay, very little respect. After this pandemic, it was really, really hard. Like, folks wanted teachers to risk their health so their kids could go back to school, right? Which was crazy to me.
And there was no win situation with the COVID thing. I mean, as an educator, I face that too. Yeah. I prefer to be in the classroom. Being out of the classroom sucks. But also, I understand why people aren't going back to the classroom, just like I understand why people aren't going back to their jobs right now. But we were even at the college level, there were absolutely not enough resources put in place to help educators teach in the way that we needed to teach.
And to navigate this, right? Just do this and do it on a dime.
Exactly.
And we're going to switch. I can't count the number of times the policy changed in District 11 over the last year for my son. Each week we were like, wait, so do you go to school this week or do you not go to school this week?
Exactly. Because we didn't know, right? Yeah. And so we have this system that was created real messed up. I'm trying not to talk and cuss crazy, but
we are a cuss safe space.
Just cause.
It was so screwed up. When you think about why we created public schools to indoctrinate the immigrants and to teach them how to take directions at a factory, and we have to have this truth tour about what schools were.
Yeah.
Now we're here, right? So after we acknowledge the truth, we need to acknowledge that we have folks in our system who do not like our kids. They're not acknowledging that, but we just did this huge equity audit. Huge. It looked at everything, right? Again, putting money where our mouth is, because that costs a lot too, right? Yeah, and it looked at everything, and we had to eyes wide open. And the data that punched me in the gut and that I'm still sitting with almost 3 weeks later and all makes me want to cry is we have this data, this survey, and you probably know as a district parent, the 5 E's survey. And it's just a survey that asks you a bunch of random questions, and it helps you show how organizationally you're if you can move certain like pieces of this survey, you can get student achievement up, all of this stuff, right? So it really speaks a lot to relational trust and all this different things. So they took the teachers' survey data from last year, I think, or maybe 2 years ago, and they broke it down. If you have a student that goes to a school that has the most English language learners, has the most non-white students, has the most poor kids, has the most kids who are on IEPs, and what do your teachers think of you if you go to one of those schools? And then you definitely have schools like Mitchell that have
that's all of them,
yeah. Right? And then you wonder why their data is screwed up. They're not going to college. They're more prone to violence. Their parents don't care. Like it, on and on and on. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it's frustrating, and that's where and this is where I get. When you hear me feeling like, I don't know if I can do this, when we've had these conversations, I don't know how to change this in people, right? For me, there's an absolute moral imperative because these are people's lives. These are these babies' lives. And we know what it means when a kid can't read when they leave school, when a kid can't do math when they leave school. We know what it means for their outcomes. Yeah. So there's an absolute moral imperative for me that these students are able to do those things. I can't make everybody come to this work the same way that I approach this work, right? That's why my babies did well, because I believed they could and I wanted them to, and I knew that they needed to be able to have good life choices, right? Right. How do I make folks think like that?
Exactly.
When y'all think these kids are coming to you gang infested and their parents don't give a damn about them and they don't care about school and they're not going to college and ain't nothing going to come out of their lives, like that's what you think.
I'm just going to add on another don't give a fuck individual to their life. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'll just be that with you.
Yeah, like it's just, so I don't know. Like, it's big, and I don't know how we start the work. I know that it has to start, and I know we have to have policy to restrain the heartless, and I know we have to put money behind it. But I also know that it's hard, and that power never concedes power voluntarily. Because when I start telling you that these kids are going to go to school with your kids, what happens, right? Right? Or when I start telling you that I might take some resources from this area because this area is in need, what's that look like?
No, the hell you not.
It's always when the money comes into play. People everybody's like bleeding heart until it starts to affect their wallet.
Right.
Like, oh, wait, no, actually.
Yeah, or their kids, right? Because my kids can't learn with certain kids, right? And I have to be very honest because I didn't move into the city. And I had to really, this last year, talk to myself about a lot of my own thoughts. Why do you live in Whitefield? Not because it's the best district, right? Because it's not. It's diverse enough, but it's not hood enough, right? You're not learning with those kids, right? Mm-hmm. And what did that mean to me, right? And why did I buy where I bought? I had to be very honest with myself about that. It hurt my own feelings because I was doing what kids not learning with certain kids. My kids are going to go to school with kids who have situations like theirs and their lives are very tame, right? Like that's learning with certain kids is not going to hurt your child. My kids really are going to be okay regardless, right? Like they're going to be fine. They have a lot of resources, right? So there's so much stuff that has to be done. I don't even know where to start sometimes, but like in our district, we started with looking at the data, sitting with it because some of it is terrible. And now it's time to get busy, right? But the data was super anticlimactic. We knew what it was. Right. What's going to hurt now is when they're like, well, this is what you have to do to fix it, right? This implementation part is where people are going to probably lose their whole minds.
So I have a question for you since we asked all our candidates this, but do you think that Colorado Springs should have like a consolidated school district instead of like El Paso County has something like 19 districts, right? It's more than any other county in the entire state.
I have to plead the fifth on it, but what I will say is I agree that we have a lot of districts. This is so contentious. It is. And these districts are like, nah, we want to maintain our stuff. I agree. Like, I grew up here, so this is normal to me, but my husband was like,
it's not. Everywhere else I've lived, it's like, no, cities have one school district.
My husband is like, I don't understand, like, what is this? Like, why is there Widefield and then Fountain, like all right there? Like, it's so weird, but, I don't know. Like, we'd have to talk about the entrance convergence of that, like what folks get from that, because I think that's what it.
I mean, I always tend to think that it's like D20 and D12 would never accept that.
No, of course
because not. they have way more money for their students.
Why would they hook up with Widefield? Why?
Yeah, that's true.
Hey,
so I think we're about to run long, John. We gotta shut our ass up.
All right.
But here's the thing.
We'll never shut up, Sean.
We'll never shut up. But for real though, I feel as though the community, like, listen, man. I think it was KRS One I heard say this, that the world will feed us poison by the pound, and we'll just suck it up, and then somehow the people will regurgitate the cure for this poison, right? And we can figure it out if we just try to figure it out and get, like, for real, try to do it. You know what I'm saying? So I believe that the answer to this stuff lies in the community.
I agree.
I believe that us educating our kids is imperative, and it's really the only way, because what you said with the policy restraining the heartless, I believe that our policy should be that we'll take care of our shit. You know what I'm saying? And we'll like donate to whatever we need to bring our kids. They don't even need nothing. You know what I'm saying? Like, just bring them here to this pod school or whatever it is.
And also, they'll engage with your system, right? Because we pay taxes into this system.
Yeah.
And I think that we forget, because I'm telling you, like, we're working on some stuff in our district that everybody's not happy about. But I will say white people have it down, like you guys do. Like, you know how to, like, talk to power and be like, and you gonna hear me.
Yeah.
I need our communities to be like,
do that, man.
We need to engage. We need to be a part of, like, go to your school board meetings, like, be in folks' face, right? Even at your schools, like, if you can't make school board meetings, that's the one thing I've said as a working parent. I can't be at the school every day.
That's
But, they know I'm there because I send an email real quick and all the time, like, for the first week or two of school. So they know, don't mess with my little black son, because I will, and I will come up on you, right? And if I need to drop my title, I'll drop that sometimes too, just so they know, like, please don't play with me.
Yeah.
It's very effective.
Right, it is. I try at first to see how they're going to treat me without the title, but they don't always treat me right. And so, like, we have to engage with these schools, right? They're just as much ours. And we need to know how, like, the local politics, how that stuff works. Yeah. Like, what is your school board doing? Like, when you have a superintendent who's not perfect, like, I think my boss is pretty dope, but when you have someone who has that heart for equity, like, we protect that, right? Like, he's still a part of a system that we are going to definitely interrogate and ask questions about, but we need to protect someone who has this heart.
Yeah, I agree.
You know, that's it. And hold them to task.
Yeah.
Still holding to task.
Yeah,
like, you said you were going to do these things, but
yeah.
How do we protect him and ensure that, we have a good board like we have right now? We have a dope board. How do we make sure the board stays like that? How do we get heard? Like, how do we do those things? And so People's College, like, for the adults, like, that's dope. Like, we need people to understand that, like, showing up at the presidential election is dope, but it's not going to impact you as much.
I feel called out though by Lexi, because I know I get all the surveys and stuff. I'm all, I know actually this is probably Lexi's own thing. I need to respond to this. Equity stuff.
This year has sucked. Like,
we get so many
we've
emails.
been in survey fatigue all year. Like, I'm not mad at anybody. When I had to send them out, I was mad myself. Like, why?
Right, yeah. That police department, what we need to do, man. Is that up on the page?
Yeah, we should put it. Yeah, we'll put it up.
Hey,
we put it on the Just Cause page, but we should put it in the.
Look at that.
We're gonna put it on Chinook and Just Cause page, man, and go take that survey about the CSPD, man. So anyway, hey, he's turning red, man. He's getting pissed.
He's got 55 minutes. We're gonna beat 55 minutes.
Jokers are not gonna be the one editing this
55
crap.
minutes.
Yeah.
All right, guys.
Hey,
we kept it.
Alexis,
thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sister. I really appreciate it, and I hope that you could come back again, and because we could do this.
Yeah, I could talk to you all day.
all day. It'd be fun, man.
And I'll respond to one of those surveys you sent.
I'm giving you grace this time.
Yeah.
Sean, you did a good job of saying Alexis, like, the whole time.
Oh,
I was
okay.
waiting for Lexi.
Oh no, am I not supposed to call you Lexi? I'm sorry.
I'm not tripping. I was like,
he refers to you as
I know.
Lexi, I feel like.
It's okay. I give him a hard time when we're, like, meeting
like new people,
professional and new people. I'm like, please don't.
I'll call you Alexis from now on.
You can call me Lexi, John.
Okay.
It's okay. It felt very natural coming from your mouth.
Okay.
That's how I gauge if, like, people are family. I was like, that don't even sound right coming out your mouth. Just call me Alexis.
All right, y'all. Appreciate it, man. Love you all.
Peace out, everybody.
Yeah.
We got your